Majora's Mask is probably one of my favorite games of all time. It's considered by many a darker approach to the Zelda formula in a series known for its long-standing quality. As a direct sequel to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, the first 3D Zelda in the franchise, Majora's Mask had big shoes to fill. Ocarina of Time previously revolutionized gaming in the late 90s with its vast open world, something the franchise was well known for. Since the first entry, a time-traveling narrative featuring two different versions of the same world in different periods and deep exploration of Hyrule's rich mythology, not only through the introduction of cutscenes explaining the beginning of the land, but also a ton of lore through other means. In all Zelda games, players take on the role of Link, a young hero destined to defeat the evil Ganondorf and save Princess Zelda from destructions. Or so was the case for some time. Ocarina of Time was grand in scope and tone, introducing elements that defined 3D action adventure games for years to come, and that's why today it's considered one of the best games of all time. Those features being the Z-targeting mechanic, which later became a staple of the Dark Souls series, the dungeons, and the game design overall. A few years after it appeared, the Zelda team was tasked with making yet another 3D Zelda on the same engine, previously used on Ocarina of Time. The development was placed under a strict deadline of 1 year, and what resulted was a game where most ideas the developers came up with were thrown right into the game. A game where the developers, wanting to distinguish themselves from the previous entry, had to invent an entirely new land with its own mythos, people, and recurring characters which had traveled all the way to this new land. Released in the 2000s, just 2 years after Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask stands apart for its eerie tone, surreal world where uncanny characteristics are just part of the environment, like its moon. Instead of revisiting Hyrule this time, the game takes place in the strange and twisted land of Termina, a world parallel to Hyrule. What, to me, makes Termina even more unsettling is its impending doom. A giant moon hangs above, ominously in the sky, threatening to crash down and destroy everything in just 3 days, and its face screams at you with tantalizing feeling, almost showing every negative emotion known to humanity. As such, the player must navigate and somehow solve the entire main quest within the 3 days the game offers you. It's a very strange game, and needless to say, it's one that even to this day is being talked about over and over again through video essays, forums, and more. People have analyzed and overanalyzed its 3-day cycle because frankly it's a fascinating mechanic, one born out of the time constraints during development. Like a lot of the game's other quirks such as the collection quest and padded content, these were solutions to the challenges of the game's development time. What makes the time mechanic stand out is that it always led to interesting scenarios during gameplay, even in my own playthroughs. That is all because of the way it works. The entire game operates on a constantly repeating loop, akin to one seen in movies like Groundhog Day. The player has 72 minutes or 3 in-game days to solve whatever they can of the main quest or complete their side quests, before the moon certainly comes crashing down, cracking and crackling as it sets its sights upon the destruction of the land of Termina, forcing the player to inevitably reset before the terrifying event even begins. This mechanic is fascinating, not only because of how it introduces pressure and urgency into the gameplay, but also because it affects the lives of the game's characters, most of them having forgotten you from cycle to cycle, while some inexplicably remember you. Characters you've helped in some days now are struggling yet again without a way of getting out of despair. And I sort of like that aspect because the game may be huge, but it focuses intimately on smaller characters and their day-to-day lives. The fact that these characters, each with their own struggles, try to live their lives even as the world ends is something that feels incredibly endearing to me. In fact, it's here that Majora's Mask feels dreamlike, the way the world resets, yet the characters keep their routines and hold on to hope in the face of doom. It feels like an echo of something, out of a dream or maybe a nightmare. Though, in my opinion, Majora's Mask isn't any darker than Ocarina of Time, which also presents the idea of a world in ruin. If anything, Ocarina's version is darker with the canonical extinction of Hyrule Castle Town. It doesn't just show a ruined world, it shows a world teetering on the brink, always in motion, always on the verge of collapse, like a surreal and unending dream of impending disaster. And this brings me to why I really want to talk about this game, because of its mystifying atmosphere. More than anything else, it's not just its darkness, it's the surrealism, the way it presents scenarios that can only be described as dreamlike. The game feels like a dream you can't wake up from. The moon ever looming in the sky and the unsettling atmosphere evokes something deeper, something subconscious, the pure essence of something phantasmagorical. Majora's Mask taps into the gray spot, both in terms of mechanics and narrative. The repeating cycle, the inability to escape a world that's always ending, mirrors the cyclical nature of recurring dreams or even nightmares. Time repeats, but unlike a lucid dream where you can control the outcome, the player is always fighting against a clock they can never fully stop. And I think that aspect of development can be seen even in the developers' mindsets. During one of the interviews for the creation of the remake, Onuma remarked that he was pushed to finish the game back on the N64 because of a dream he had. During the development of the original Majora's Mask, he had a nightmare in which he was being chased by a Deku Scrub. He later recounted how this nightmare wasn't just a figment of his exhausted mind, mirrored the scene in the game that had already been completed by one person from the dev team, almost as if the game itself had entered his dreams. He joked with his team, asking them how they had managed to recreate his dream so perfectly.
You must have been worried that you were all exhausted.
I suppose, and at the time I did have a sense that I was being pushed on by something strange.
You might have been wearing one of those masks.
I had a dream about it.
What kind of dream was it?
It was a dream about being chased by a Deku.
Oh, a dream where you were being chased around?
I was thinking about an event for the Deku, and have been trying to figure out what to do with it. I thought of it at home, and Dekus appeared in my dream. I woke up screaming. I went to work the next day, and that's when Kagoe-san told me that he finished making a movie for the Dekus. So I had him show it to me, and that movie was exactly like my dream. I even told him, "How do you even know my dream?" That's how put up against the edge I was back then.
Perhaps you were possessed by something.
Possibly. Onuma himself had wondered if he was being driven by something strange, like a dream that manifests into reality, a figment of his imagination perhaps breaking through somehow into the physical world. It's quite a creepy thought to say the least, and it's something that factors around the game's overall uneasy atmosphere. It's almost like the game had seeped straight into his consciousness. This is probably what interests me the most. In many regards, it's both the idea of the dreamlike world and the real-world implications that draw me in. I want to shift our attention towards Onuma's dream. It's the most significant part to me, especially because the focus on dreams feels ever-present in this game. I did touch upon this a little in my Denpa video, mostly through both Humaniki and the ideal Denpa dream. It's something of a reoccurring motif and has been in my videos for a while. That doesn't include the Denpa video, but also the PS1 video as well. It's something that deeply fascinates me, the idea of dreams protruding into reality. And that's why I wanted to write this video on this rather frankly obscure detail from Majora's Mask's game development, As for its relation with my other videos, if you're interested, you can go watch my other ones on any of those topics I mentioned above. But the important aspect of it is that it tells us something crucial about Onuma and the way he developed and envisioned the game. It's his manifested dream. The staff gave each character relevant to a quest a dream, as in an ideal, a goal or desire they are striving for. Instead of hiding in unconscious worlds, these characters face struggles and work to solve their problems. The unsettling part is that none of their progress or achievements remain after each reset. Whether it's the people you've reunited or the families you've cured and helped, all their efforts are erased because time doesn't stay still. It's as if they're caught in an endless cycle, chasing dreams that are constantly slipping away, much like in our own reoccurring nightmares. What I find more intriguing is analyzing Onuma's personal dream during the game's development, and that's what I want to do. I want to follow the ideas and ways of dissecting a dream of Carl Jung. From a Jungian perspective, the dream Onuma had about being chased by a Deku crab can be viewed as an expression of the subconscious mind manifesting through archetypal imagery. In Jungian psychology, dreams often serve as a way for the unconscious to communicate unresolved internal conflicts or fears, typically through symbolic representations. The dream here could be seen as the soul in want of what, however, is left to interpretation, usually as a means to resolve wounds left under the awakened self, like the phantom pain of a dismembered limb, horrific yet unreal. The Deku crab represents a shadow figure, the darker parts we wish to repress for success, like a zit concealed for a photoshoot, or a game developer hiding stress from a tight deadline. It could be aspects of one's personality or psyche that are in conflict with the conscious mind, but as all facades, barriers, dams, and walls, they fall, and usually spectacularly so. Cue the nightmare of our pressurized game dev. Onuma at the time was under immense pressure to complete Majora's Mask within a tight deadline. Feelings of stress were out of the question and possibly a sense of losing control. The Deku chasing him in his dream symbolizes this pressure or even the repressed anxiety surrounding the project that he was unable to consciously process during his waking hours. The unnerving quality of this episode, though, is its manifestation in reality. With the completed scene of the game, Jung would most likely have seen it as synchronicity, where the waking world and the darker self meet in the middle to form a raw and meaningful gray. This particular synchronization speaks to how deeply he was embedded in the creation process, these subconscious and conscious realms no longer making sense and blending together in strange ways. The synchronicity between Onuma's dreams and the finished work speaks to how deeply he was embedded in the creation process. The subconscious and conscious realms no longer making sense and blending together in strange ways. It's almost as if the game itself, like the world of Majora's Mask, was a dream world that intruded into reality. Lastly, there's the pursuit of the self. As mentioned above, the darker half that we shackle off does all in its might to reattach itself to us, it being a rightful part of us, does so in a way that feels threatening and desperate, manifesting as that dream, one of fear of that self you hide. The Deku, which is a common enemy in the game, can be seen as a symbol of both the creative force driving the project and the psychological toll it was executing upon Onuma, both through the friendly Dekus we meet and even the more aggressive ones. His waking to a scream suggests the intensity of this unconscious struggle, perhaps a confrontation with the fact that the project had become more than just a game. It had become something more, something difficult to escape. As such, his dream can be understood through the Jungian lens as his psyche attempting to reconcile the creative and emotional pressures he was under. The shadow aspect represented by the Deku was a manifestation of these unacknowledged stresses, while the dream's synchronicity with the actual game reflects the deep psychological connection between Onuma and the world he was creating. It's an example of how art and creation can become an extension of the creator's inner world. But ultimately, it's also something I've experienced myself. A dream vivid and to a certain extent as terrifying as he is. Mine perhaps not derived from the creative process, but derived from elements of Majora's Mask. Although, in order to talk about my dream, we must continue this discussion about fighting demons both in the literal and physical sense. In Majora's Mask, Skull Kid embodies a sort of chaotic evil that feels less like a traditional villain, more like an impish force of nature. A demon from the world of dreams, without rhyme or reason, just there to disrupt, to destroy. An ancient evil of pure hatred and nothing else. Yet, when we get to enter the world of Majora, the psyche of Skull Kid, represented by the place on the moon, consists of a strange sunny field with a lone tree in the center. It's essentially a dreamlike state in which Skull Kid's mind has been placed while Majora uses him just like a puppet, moving his limbs without any input from him. Running around the tree are 4 lunar children, each wearing one of the 4 boss masks. There is also a child sitting underneath a tree wearing Majora's mask. While the other 4 children are running and playing with each other, they ignore the Majora child, almost insinuating that Majora, or the representation of Skull Kid, was always the odd one out. It's a straight connection to the inner demons, perhaps of one's psyche. In this scene, Majora is more than a mask. It is Skull Kid's inner demon, the embodiment of his pain and exclusion, and what essentially led him to put on the mask in the first place. So this appears to be his way of coping with his past, locking himself away and letting the mask take control. This expression is just one of many faces of the game's inner struggles. Struggles which are also present in the characters of Termina you end up meeting, which are battling their own demons too. Some struggle with loss, some with regret and others with fear. For instance, Anju and Kafei's quest to reunite before the world ends highlights themes of love and regret. Meanwhile, the Goron leader Darmani laments his failure to protect his people even after death. These are personal battles, making the narrative feel much more intimate and emotional. Link himself is no exception. He's battling his own demons, his search for a lost friend, his very navy, after the events of Ocarina of Time. His journey through Termina is one of isolation, fear, and the overwhelming responsibility of saving a world that isn't even his own. We can even see this reflected in the game's opening, where Link is knocked unconscious and transformed into a Deku scrub. His isolation and disempowerment in this unfamiliar world echoes Jungian concepts of the shadow self, representing a loss of identity and the need to reconcile with his inner fears. Something he has done in the past before, but we'll return to that topic later. The psychological layer goes deeper than just the surface level narrative. Despite the game's E rating, Majora's Mask uses these personal stories to explore emotional trauma, existential fear and loss, concepts that are traditionally associated with more mature media. Even though it's a fantasy game, it's filled with moments where characters express genuine psychological distress. For example, Cremia's acceptance of the moon's destruction and her decision to comfort her sister with what essentially is alcohol, knowing that they likely will not survive. Cremia grants her younger sister, who does not know of the fate that will befall them, the wish to drink Chateau Romani for the first time, something she had been denying Romani since she was not an adult yet. Furthermore, she acknowledges Romani as an adult and even promises to make her a mask to officially signify her younger sister's status as a grown-up. Before heading back to their home, Cremia asks her sister to sleep with her in her bed, to which Romani agrees. All these ideas bring a quite somber atmosphere to the game, the battling of these struggles, of these inner demons. The moon itself, with its ominous face, feels like a constant reminder of these inner demons. a force that looms over everything, threatening to destroy the world. It's as if the game takes the abstract fears and anxieties that we all carry with us, turns them into a literal threat. Time marches and none of us may ever stop it from marching by. Demons are quite literally terrifying. They're supposed to be the embodiment of evil. They're often defined as an evil spirit or devil, especially one thought to possess a person or act as a tormentor in hell. But I think the definition is much broader than that, outside its religious context. And Majora's Mask is no stranger to these weird and off-putting creatures. Its world is filled with creatures of the Zelda universe, as in most entries from the series. I think one creature that really stood out to me on my first playthrough was the Negiron, mostly because of their appearance. They look very similar to some sort of perturbed or insane Gorons. I think the look is quite creepy, and I've seen theories about them being some sort of demon variant of the Goron, which is something that makes the hair on the back of my spine jump right up. This theory is further emphasized by the fact the official Great Hyrule Encyclopedia states they're strange-looking, rock-like creatures that look and move similar to Gorons. They have adapted their moving patterns to directly resemble a rolling Goron, making them more deadly when they are encountered. Not only that, but also the fact in Japanese the word neji means twisted or warped, where the suffix of ron is likely taken from the term Goron. Thus, these creatures are named by the characteristic of being a twisted Goron. In many myths and folklore, including Japanese mythology, demons or evil forces are often depicted as twisted versions of familiar or benign figures mankind is well familiar with. In this case, be it the kitsune or similar examples which appear as animals, like the tanuki, which is very similar to the way Negirons mimic other species. The Negiron mimics Gorons, friendly and peaceful creatures in the Zelda universe, but it does so deceptively, using its resemblance to trick the player. This false appearance could be seen as a form of demonic deception, aligning with how demons are often shapeshifters or deceivers, leading humans or even other races into a false sense of security. It's also the fact, as I explained earlier, the prefix neji doesn't only mean physical, but also may imply moral or spiritual corruption. As such, these ideas echo an almost demonic version of a Goron. In many ways, I like thinking back to the idea of mimicry, of deceiving, and of demons, because to me it's an aspect that interested me, mostly the part with the mythos. Now, Hyrule, and by extension Termina and all other worlds in the Zelda universe, have already established lore of their own, and as such they create myths and legends in turn in-game. Now, we as the player know these types of events are somewhat fake, but what if there were a game that would pull demons and entities straight out of real mythology? Something people actually believed at one point, and something that may have haunted their dreams like they have mine. I'm talking about none other than the Shin Megami Tensei franchise. Shin Megami Tensei is unique in the world of RPGs because it draws directly from real mythology, folklore, and religion, and unlike fantasy worlds like Zelda, has some grounded roots. The game pulls from legends across cultures: Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Greek, Norse, Japanese, and even my own country's, Romania's folklore. Each of the creatures, or as the series calls them, demons, is treated with the respect they deserve. They aren't just fictional creatures or reimagined monsters. They are figures that have shaped belief systems, cultures, and in some cases, entire societies. Although some creative liberties have been taken, it comes nothing short of amazing. The reason the video just took a straight jump is because, first and foremost, figures of mythology often represent archetypal figures from Jungian psychology, much like the symbolic figures that emerge in dreams, and what we've talked about so far. And though my mostly concrete analysis of Majora's Mask themes, I want to delve deeper into the idea of dreaming and sleep, I already went through its creatures and the idea that the creative process had entered the mind of its creator. I think in this case, because Shin Megami Tensei and its spin-off title Persona are both very based in Jungian psychology, it makes sense exploring them. First, because gameplay-wise there is one thing related to Majora's Mask where we could draw parallels to, and two, because both real-life Mythos and made-up Mythos have affected my dreams in the past. Let's draw a jumping point. The demons in Shin Megami Tensei can be connected directly to Jung's theories of the unconscious. In Jungian psychology, the unconscious mind plays a central role in shaping human behavior, dreams, and even cultural symbols. Here, there's exactly two different aspects that arise, the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. The personal unconscious consists of everything in the psyche that we are not constantly aware of, but that still affects our behaviors and emotions. This includes repressed memories, forgotten experiences, and unresolved emotional conflicts. In dreams, the personal unconscious often manifests in symbolic forms, sometimes as threatening figures, environments, or scenarios that reflect these unresolved inner struggles. I've always wondered, do animals have a consciousness? A train of thought which materializes so often, figures and environments in their memory and their dreams? How about objects? Can objects think? Can a computer have thoughts? Is the personal unconscious something that can form around things? And if it can, how will it do it? I was thinking the other day about this, and it so happened that exact day when I was scrolling on Twitter. Now, bear with me for a second as this deviates a bit from the subject at hand, which I'll return to later. I stumbled upon a video showcasing someone playing Minecraft. Now, there's nothing apparently wrong with it, until I watched a few seconds of the video and it just took me aback. The video was nonsensical, blurry, and had a ton of dreamlike qualities. I looked into it and found it to be some sort of AI named Oasis. Now, despite its controversial nature, AI has always intrigued me. I don't condone the use of it, especially to create, be it art or word. But in images, especially from early AI, we see a very strange and often off-putting feeling to it. I've often dreamed of playing video games, and in my dreams it appeared as though I had short-term memory loss. Constantly actions were blending into each other, like I was experiencing waves of dementia in a condensed liquid and colored form. Does a machine imagine as such? Does it dream? Or is it simply trying to mimic purely out of memory? And as such, where does its memory stem from? People understand what a dream is. Does the machine understand that its perception of Minecraft, what it shows you in all melded splendor, is a dreamlike rendition of real Minecraft, or does it think of it as its own creation? You know the real from the dream world, especially as you wake. The machine being fed real, does it think its dream is real? Since it's never woken, does it ever get to feel what reality is? How does it interpret gameplay anyway? The very concept feels foreign, as if I'm peering into a robot's dream, if such a thing even exists. So real yet so far, so close yet so far. You can barely remember actions. Every time you try to build something, it turns into someone else's construction. Every time you try to walk or mine, it feels like the AI is taking that action away from you. Tantalizing is a word in the English language. It's so close, right there in your reach, and for that reason you want it more. But for some other reason it just stays out of your reach. Well, the word comes from the ancient Greek character Tantalus, who in typical Greek fashion decided to go against the gods. Got punished by Zeus by being sent down into Hades. In Hades, he's standing in a pool of water and there's an apple tree that is standing right above him. But every time he tries to take a sip of the water retreats back into the ground. And any time he tries to climb or grab up for the apple tree moves its branches to stay barely outside of his reach. The robot forgets where you are, sometimes moving you through fog or glitching visuals as if the simulation is fraying. Crafting too feels otherworldly, like creating something from nothing. a sensation of both tangible and intangible, as if you're forging elements in the hazy fog of a dream. It's Minecraft, and yet it isn't. Walking backward produces an endless looping terrain, almost like a boundaryless dream. Mobs that should look familiar are jumbled, misshapen blobs, adding to that sense of unreality. The world itself as such becomes the apple tree, the fray and the fountain of water. It ultimately becomes Tantalus's suffering incarnate. A robot probably doesn't have a personal unconscious. It's fooled by lines of code and lies to stitch together and mimic what it thinks Minecraft is. Unlike people or places, it does not have unresolved conflicts, neither regret, things exhibited well in the residents of Termina. Many of the characters in Majora's Mask represent individuals with unresolved conflicts. Link himself becomes a symbol of these struggles as he puts on different masks to embody various personas, slices of life taken from the different races, each mask symbolizing a different part of the personal unconscious, a hidden trait or conflict he must work through to achieve inner balance, as well as memories of those long gone, the dead, and the idea of dealing with death. As Link helps these characters resolve their issues, he moves towards balance within himself. Each mask is a small step toward confronting his own internal demons, his isolation, his sense of loss, and the overwhelming task of saving a world that isn't his own. We see in-game through the Song of Healing a literal process of coming to terms with not only death, but accepting a different mask from each of the races, as such taking part of their consciousness and their collective unconsciousness. This is indicated through the first cutscene where Link finally takes off the Deku mask. As he waves goodbye to the Deku, he allows it to pass to the next life, while also technically having taken part of its collective unconscious. This is indicated to the first cutscene where multiple Dekus are present. Now, while the personal unconscious is concerned with individual struggles, the collective unconscious represents shared experiences, knowledge, and symbols inherited from our ancestors. This includes universal patterns of behavior and mythological archetypes that transcend individual experience, ideas and figures that are common across all of humanity. Jung believed that this part of the unconscious contains archetypes, universal symbols and themes that appear across cultures and throughout history. These archetypes include figures like the hero, the shadow, and the trickster, which can be seen in mythology, religion, and even modern storytelling. So that is how, when Link puts on a mask, he not only assumes the identity and look of the race or person he took from, but he also takes on their responsibilities and archetypes, almost becoming a shadow of the deceased. In Shin Megami Tensei, the demons you face often embody personal fears or desires as well. Since they come from real-world mythology, their symbolic weight carries added significance. When encountering these demons, they can be seen as manifestations of unresolved issues from the personal unconscious, but also as an extended part of the collective unconsciousness, as they come from a time way before ours. Be it gods, demons, creatures, angels, vampires, and anything of the likes. They start slotting in like puzzle pieces onto different archetypes. There's a sort of familiar feeling to meeting each of the races in a fantasy setting, in any of the Zelda games, for example. These archetypes, much like the masks in Majora's Mask, represent different facets of the human psyche, but in the process they also end up taking up other roles, primarily through gameplay. This is seen in Majora's Mask. Link wearing the faces of the other races is pretty self-explanatory, but in any of the SMT games, less so. In those games, there are 2 or 3 ways to interact with demons. Most common, these are either fighting them, through which the literal metaphor of fighting one's personal demons come true, or even more broad and self-explanatory, fighting the demons of past generations of the human race. In one of the best entries of the series, Strange Journey, we're told that the reason the main catalyst of the game, the Schwarzwelt, appears is because of humanity's abuse of nature, and as long as humans abuse nature, the Schwarzwelt cannot be removed from reality. Both the moon and the Schwarzwelt act like end-of-the-world scenarios, as such, and require an interaction from an outsider, an individual observer coming into this world with their own beliefs and ideas. In both games, the protagonist represents the hero archetype, a figure that undergoes a journey of self-discovery, confronting external and internal challenges to reach personal wholeness. The hero's journey symbolizes as such the path to individualization. The process of integrating as such is the base of any good linearity within a story exploring themes around the player. We've previously defined and spoken about the concept of shadow, which is explored in both Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, but its appearance in Ocarina marks something rather important. We know from contextual clues that the Link we're following has already been through the events of the previous games, as he is both missing a fairy and has the Ocarina of Time from Princess Zelda. So even though Link does not have or face a physical shadow in Majora's Mask, he has previously faced one in Ocarina of Time's Water Temple. Link gets to face off against a shadow version of himself, the shadow representing the darker hidden side of our personality, qualities we deny, reject, or repress. The Hyrule Historia states that the evil thoughts and resentments of Ganondorf, who had been killed by an earlier incarnation of Link in Twilight Princess, manifested through the Dark Mirror in the form of Link, and as such, in all the twisted qualities of Link. Each previous or subsequent version is indeed the textbook definition of the Jungian shadow. And as such, during the events of Majora's Mask, not only has Link defeated his shadow in the past game, but he's now tasked with facing the threat of the world ending. No longer as his thoughts and desires materialized as an evil version of himself, but this time through Majora itself, as it represents chaos, destruction, and the darker, more sinister aspects of the world of Termina. While in the Shin Megami Tensei spin-off Persona, shadows are a common occurrence and are a one-to-one recreation of their Jungian counterparts, both games seem to me interlocked with a lot of deeper meaning, even though derived through observation and as such not all of it being intentional or particularly as relevant, just the way my brain processed them. While I think there are many themes to Majora's Mask, I believe dreams are at its core, both in the intangibility of saving the world from a fallen moon and also through the absurdities of some of the situations Link finds himself in. It's the concept of the dream, the ideal of saving the world, that fascinates me the most. I think the 3-day timer in Majora's Mask is what creates a very compelling end-of-the-world story that, placed within these symbols, creates a truly one-of-a-kind game. The impending doom symbolized by the falling moon looms over everything, making every action, every choice feel weighty and significant, yet absurd and terrifying, like Dream is. The moment you try to do something in a dream, the moment you try to create, change things in Majora's Mask, it feels useless as the cycle gets to the end and it feels utterly tantalizing. Just like the AI simulation I talked about earlier, it feels like the rug has been pulled from under you, and while the surreal aspect is still present and doesn't feel as impactful as nonsensical, it's there, it's omnipresent. We've explored the idea of dreams as in the subconscious space, but we've barely tackled the idea of them as an ideal. And I think the best way to do that is to take a case study where a dream is used as a main gameplay mechanic. In such a context, I know the perfect candidate for that, as we've spoken about it when tackling the demonic aspect of the discussion. The Shin Megami Tensei series does a great job at portraying the idea of an ideal coming to fruition through its alignment system. Although not as relevant to my dream, I'll explore the idea since I put the game on the table. The alignment system in Shin Megami Tensei, typically divided into law, chaos, and neutral, allows the player to shape the world according to their ideals, making choices that affect not only the outcome of the story, but the very fabric of reality within the game. It's a system where, unlike many traditional RPGs, there isn't a clear right or wrong path. Instead, each alignment represents a different visions of what the ideal world could look like based on deeply philosophical concepts. Here, there's a representative for each alignment within each game, which you would side with in order to fulfill their dreams. One of the key things I've balanced this video upon, the exploration of dreams, not only through sleep, but through ideals. Law aligns with order, structure, and sometimes harsh authoritarian control, while chaos embraces freedom, individuality, but also often results in destruction or anarchy. Neutrality sits in between, representing balance or the rejection of extremes. And this brings me back to why I started making this video in the first place, because I had a dream myself, a dream about mechanics from both Majora's Mask and Shin Megami Tensei, the tantalizing feeling protruding my being. Much like Jung's idea of individualization, the process of integrating all parts of the self, all of what I've written about, light and dark, conscious and unconscious. These games and these feelings offer journeys of self-discovery, maybe unconsciously so to me, no pun intended. I'm now going to go into my personal experience featuring a quite disturbing dream I've had a few weeks back, which is what inspired me to make this video in the first place. The dream began with the knowledge well implanted into my brain that I was supposed to go to the past, somewhere, an indiscriminate country of rapid technological advancement, sometime in the 90s. As I began the dream, I saw the screen clearly saying dawn of the first day, and I awoke in some sort of industrial Asian society. It was like a mix of modern-day Tokyo and the gritty look of Blade Runner's Los Angeles, with giant oil rigs rigidly locked into its landscape. I found myself transported to a distant past, somewhere that resembled Japan yet felt distinctly otherworldly. The weather mirrored the grey drizzle of my own memories from a visit to Tokyo this year, but the landscape was a stark reminder of an ultra-corporatist society. The skies let a weak drizzle pass by as the rain hit each corner and the skies had turned grey. As I stood at the bus station, I was struck by the sight of an oil rig looming beside me. Its massive structure seemed oddly connected to the asphalt beneath my feet, stark reminder of the industrial landscape that surrounded me. Instead of being on land, its body was melted with the concrete into the oceanic waves, almost like an extension of the aspects of industrialization breaking through. I glanced around, noting the greyness of the city where the buildings towered on either side, a constant reminder of the looming corporate presence. I was invited to participate in a class at one of the schools which were on the oil rig. I had a mission, to infiltrate a school and gather intel on something I didn't fully understand. As I entered, I was met with a classroom that felt trapped in time. The room was small, crammed with just 6 wooden chairs and tables. The teacher's desk squeezed into the corner and a large window letting in the sound of the rain. The ambience was nostalgic, seeming almost like what few memories remain of my grandmother's old apartment, with lace curtains swaying gently in the damp air, wooden furniture and very weak glass windows. Here I got approached by a boy who didn't really tell me his name or anything, but we became acquainted. After classes, he invited me to his home, which was also located on an oil rig, a different one on the other side of the city. We took a bus to reach there, but I don't remember much of the bus ride. A towering building that loomed ominously in the distance. Together we climbed the narrow metal staircase, entering his apartment, which turned out to be an even tighter space than I had imagined. I had followed him home because I needed that intel on something and had a feeling he possessed it. Yet, like in every dream, it's like I was just driven by my incentive to be there. Inside, I was met with a cramped living area, a train-like apartment that was so narrow my shoulders didn't fit. The window ledge took up most of the space. Under it was an old radiator. We had to jump the window ledge, which was inside the apartment, to get to the so-called living room, where a mat served as the floor with a small television and a PS1 nestled in the corner. The apartment felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in around me. As my friend excused himself to take care of something, I felt an odd sense of guilt. I knew I had a mission to complete, yet my gaze wandered over his stack of games. I thought about how I could take some back with me as a reward for saving the world, though I quickly brushed aside the thought of stealing. Suddenly a scream echoed from a room behind me, piercing the mundane sounds of the rain and those of the console I was playing on while he was gone with some sort of personal affair. That word from earlier, tantalizing, that is the moment I felt the water get taken away from me. The apple tree retreated, and my actions became automatic, non-lucid, out of my control, and subconsciously, I knew that I had made a huge mistake by following the sound. Compelled by curiosity, I opened the door behind me, where the sound had resonated from. In front of me stood a dark chamber that seemed to stretch endlessly, the light from my doorway barely illuminating the space. In the shadow, there was a figure I couldn't make out yet. I glimpsed something grotesque, a skinless baby, crimson and writhing, gnawing on what appeared to be a corpse. Its neon green eyes pierced through the darkness, glowing like malevolent lanterns, and jagged fangs glistened against its raw, bleeding muscles. It looked extremely similar to the one in Resident Evil Village, except those eyes. Panic surged within me as I felt the grip of terror tightening around my chest. I could hardly comprehend the horror before me. I screamed, my voice echoing through the nightmare and managing to break through in the real world. As I screamed so hard, I almost awoke myself. And in that moment, I experienced a bizarre sense of detachment, as if I were watching myself from a distance, from third person. My face twisted in horror like Link when he equipped a mask in Majora's Mask. Same camera angle, same crackling sound. I managed to come out of it for a second to see one of the demon designs from Shin Megami Tensei sitting in a corner. As my hands trembled, I felt like I had lost control. Frantically, I scanned the room and spotted a crowbar on the ground. Snatched it up, driven by a primal instinct to defend myself. I lunged forward, swinging the crowbar as I screamed, delivering blow after blow to the monstrous infant. The gruesome act left me breathless, and as the creature's body crumpled into a pulpy mess, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me, almost like I had fainted and just now waken up from a nightmare. I came to the realization of what I had done, and it felt entirely wrong. When the haze cleared, I was covered in blood, both mine and the creature's. A rustling sound drew my attention, and I turned to find a woman, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, he killed both my husband and son," she cried, urgency in her voice. "Please hurry, he might kill me next." With a desperate leap, she scrambled over the radiator ledge, her eyes wide with fear. I had been framed, perhaps? It was too late, as I screamed, "No!" as the clock from Majora's Mask started audibly hitting its gongs, its theme echoing through my dream, and then... blank. Whiteness. I got greeted with a familiar screen saying "Dawn of a New Day." I woke up in class the next day. My classmates turned around and with bloodshot eyes fixated me with their gaze. I struggled to keep my composure, but I fainted only to wake up in the real world, scared, alone in my room. Frantically looking for a pen, I wrote the dream down, looking for an answer. Yet, none came, and yet again, time had managed to trap me in endless loop. Even as you do find meaning in my words or ramblings, I hope I find peace in my sleep next time, no longer haunted by Majora's Mask, dreams, or demons.